Hey everybody, welcome to Life is Beautiful. I'm Anthony, and today I want to talk a little bit about some more patron saints of beer, particularly patron saints of beer in Belgium. Now, a little while ago, I created a video in my Legends of Beer series where we talked about Saint Arnold of Soissons, who became this mythical, canonized legend of beer, who became the patron saint of brewers and Belgian beer and hops all throughout Belgium and the Netherlands. He was this badass warrior monk. He was this prolific soldier and military leader. He was a bit of a hermit and a recluse, and all along he performed miracles that were kind of beer related. It helped keep people alive through the power of beer. He also is known for stopping plagues through the use of beer as a replacement for water. So all in all, pretty important guy, I would say. Here's why I'm making another video on patron saints of beer in Belgium. And it's because while I was going through doing my research on St. Arnold of Soissons, I came across more St. Arnolds who were also patron saints of beer. As you can imagine, that was incredibly difficult to parse out and figure out what story is attributed to who and who did what, because they're all St. Arnold and they all did beer stuff, so very confusing. But I think that I was finally able to segregate them all out into their own individual story. So today I want to talk about the two other St. Arnolds of beer. So the first St. Arnold I want to talk about is actually named St. Arnolf of Metz. St. Arnolf was born around the year 580 AD in the Alsace region of France. It's this interesting little sliver that has gone back and forth between its ownership between France and Germany, countless times. So it's actually a pretty cool region, very French, of course, everyone speaks French, but it has a lot of Germanic influence. Legend says that he was from a pretty prolific family, even possibly being a part of the nobility of Austria. So he was pretty well known. And like St. Arnold of Soissons, he was known for also being a great warrior monk as well. Well, I guess he was just a soldier at that time, later to become a monk. The weird thing about St. Arnolf is that he really didn't do too much with beer or brewing throughout the majority of his life. And that's very different than St. Arnold of Soissons, where, he actively tried to preach the word of beer and try to improve brewing and the adoption of clean beer as a godly work in order to stop plagues and everything. So it's weird that St. Arnolf also became a patron saint of beer when really he didn't do anything. He was a bit of a military leader. He became a little bit of a politician, and then eventually retiring from the public life to become a monk. So where he eventually did start getting tied into the world of beer actually follows his death around the year 640 AD. So in his monkdom, he became a bit of a recluse, living up in a very hostile terrain, very rocky, very jagged, very inaccessible. So apparently after his death, somehow word spread down to the common people and his parishioners, who decided that they were going to take a journey up to this remote mountainous location and actually take his body back down to the lowlands in order to be able to be properly entombed. Now, as I mentioned, this was incredibly difficult for these people because it was pretty inhospitable, pretty difficult to navigate terrain, and it's much worse when you're carrying around a bunch of dead weight. You get it? So being so worn out and tired from this difficult journey, his parishioners decided that they were actually going to take a little bit of a break at a local tavern. And when they got there, they were actually greeted with some very negative news. The barkeep at the tavern said that they actually only had one mug of beer left. They were completely sold out. They only had one mug left for all these people. Now here's where the miracle happened. As they passed that single mug around, it was bottomless. They were able to drink to their fill, all becoming intoxicated and rejuvenated with all the life-giving power and hydration of beer back in those days. And no matter how much they drank, that one mug never ran out. Kind of very similar to that whole Jesus and the fish loaves thing. And it seemed that this was actually an answered prayer from St. Arnolf of Metz himself, because one of the parishioners, when he was told that news, he fell to his knees and he screamed, "St. Arnolf will give us what we require." And I guess he did so. So this was actually the third and final miracle that Saint Arnolf supposedly did throughout his lifetime and I guess afterlife, which allowed him to actually be canonized. Now, the other two are completely unbeer related, but it's because of this last story that he became known as the patron saint of beer. I mean, I guess if you have to go out with a bang, you know? I mean, that's if somebody gave me a never-ending mug of beer, I mean, they would probably be my patron saint too. Now, what I actually think is the true miracle of St. Arnulf is that he actually did play a pretty significant role in the world of beer, particularly in Trappist and monkish brewing. See, hundreds of years later, his descendants actually was Charlemagne, the first emperor of Europe. And Charlemagne, one of his big decrees was that he really pushed forward Benedictine brewing practices. He really wanted these abbeys and these monasteries to become central hubs of providing food, nutrition, and of course hydration in a cleanliness sense. So that meant beer. So because of St. Arnulf of Metz's lineage, we actually did eventually snowball into the modern hype era of Trappist beer. So that's pretty cool, I think. There are two other people that I've seen that are patron saints of beer that have a name kind of revolving around Arnold. One I saw was Arnold, but honestly, all the stories and everything I found regarding him were almost exactly the exact same thing that I saw coming from either St. Arnold of Soissons or St. Arnold of Metz. And I mean, the location in Belgium, Netherlands area, and just the actions and his kind of bio were just so dang similar. I just have to assume that it was a bit of a translation or a local dialect thing that caused that division. So I'm actually not going to cover him because I would just be retelling the last two stories on St. Arnold. But I do want to tell you about St. Arneu of Odinard. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Now, St. Arneu was very similar to Arnold and Arnold of Soissons because they were supposedly going around doing the whole political thing, doing the whole military thing, doing the whole monk thing, and all being tied into beer, all in the same Belgian region in Flanders and everything like that. So once again, it's very difficult to tell if this actually was a completely separate person. However, his story and the miracles he performed seemed drastically different from either of the other Arnolds and Arnolfs and Arnolds. It's very confusing. His miracles seemed drastically different enough that I felt that it was safe to say that he was his own unique person if he existed. There is one other problem with Saint Arneu, and that is the sources on him are very sparse. In fact, the vast majority of sources I was able to find on him all stem back to the same originating source article titled "The Saints of Suds, When the Saints Go Mashing In," which is a hilarious title. I love a good pun. Regardless, the way that the story goes is that Saint Arneu at this time was in Belgium, but he was on a military campaign leading a band of soldiers to conquer more land. It doesn't really go into the specifics of what he was doing. During this campaign, Saint Arneu would frequently call out to God, "Please give my men beer so that way they could be fed and given nutrition and hydrated and everything like that." And he was always granted this request. And it is incredibly vague how that is so. And if you look at some of like the previous military campaigns that have happened with a little bit more record keeping, it was probably because they were going through rampaging through the villages, destroying breweries, and taking everything as their spoils. So they probably were constantly rewarded with beer, but probably through very violent means instead of divinely. I do wish that original article went a little bit more in depth, talking about the descriptions and the actual aspects of this miracle, because all other resources, quote unquote, kind of stem from that article. So I do wish they were a little less vague. Unfortunately, that is all we really know about Saint Arneu of Odinard. I find it just so strange because, you know, he's not canonized. He's not in the official list of canonized saints from the Catholic Church. But that his miracle was different enough from every other Saint Arnold, which, you know, was a cool miracle, I guess, giving him that patron saint status of beer. But it's just so odd to me because they gave him an official location. You know, he's Saint Arneu of Odinard, which is a real location that you can visit and see today, but there's just no records of him. I mean, the town doesn't even really claim him. So I just find that very strange, and it's hard to actually be able to say, yeah, he probably did exist when there's no real evidence. It's for that reason, I gotta say, it's probably... Saint Arneu of Odinard was probably just a bit of a ripoff of Saint Arnold of Metz. Throughout that, I mean, they were both active in the same locations. They were both active in a very similar fashion. It's just so strange that he would have such a completely different miracle. You know, you would figure if they were tied in together that they would be separate, but they're not. But the fact that they are both very similar in background and both patron saints of Belgian beer specifically, it kind of strengthens the argument that I'm trying to make that they're probably the same person. Weirdly enough, even though he is certainly one of the lesser known beer saints and certainly one of the lesser known Saint Arnolds, Saint Arneu, like Saint Arnold of Soissons, who has a brewery named after him in Texas, Saint Arneu has a brewery named after him in New Zealand, of all places, where the Saint Arneu Brewery of New South Wales has been brewing saintly-inspired beer since 2001. So that kind of wraps up all the different Saint Arnolds, all the different patron saints of beer. These two, possibly three, it was hard to fit that into the original video, so I wanted to make it their own because, I mean, they possibly could have been real and they possibly could have been different people, and maybe they're just like local legends, local saints that you're not going to be able to find a whole lot of information on unless you were either there or in the current place now. But what I'm trying to get at is they seem different enough that they warranted their own video, and I just think it's pretty interesting that there's 3, possibly 4 Saint Arnolds throughout Central Western Europe that were all the patron saints of beer who all had very similar backgrounds. Now, I do try to put as much research and verification and validation into my videos as I can, you know, because I want to be able to tell the truth. But I have to say, you might want to take a good chunk of this video as with a grain of salt, because I have no doubt that there was Saint Arnold of Soissons, pretty well recorded and, you know, officially recognized as a canonized saint. And there is also the Saint Arnolf of Metz, who is also a probable real person and canonized saint, officially recognized. But the other twos, Arnold and Arneu, they're probably just Saint Arnold of Soissons. Anyways, at this point in time, who really knows? I know I don't. I still honestly feel just as confused as I did when I first started researching this video. So regardless, I thought maybe this would be interesting. So thank you for watching, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned something about your favorite beer guy named Arnold. So thank you. Like, comment, subscribe. Remember, there's a story in every bottle, as convoluted as it is, and that life is beautiful. Cheers, y'all.